I'm not new to Virginia trails. I try to keep things simple, stick to blazes, leave the place better than I found it, and turn around if something feels wrong. McAfee Knob had been on my list for years, but I always went on weekends and got stuck in lines on the slab. I wanted to see it without the crowd. Mid-October looked perfect. Weekday, leaf color at peak, a light rain the night before to settle the dust. I parked at the Route 311 lot before first light around 6:10 a.m., drank lukewarm coffee, and shouldered a small pack. I had a folded paper map in my chest pocket, a thin shell, a first aid kit, water, and trekking poles. I told myself I'd be back at the car by early afternoon. The plan was an easy push up the Appalachian Trail to the overlook, maybe sit on the ledge for 10 minutes, and head down before any afternoon showers built over Catawba Valley. The parking lot was quiet. One other car sat under the street light, windows fogged. By the time I crossed the road and stepped into the trees, the last trace of highway noise faded and the air changed. It had that damp, sour smell you get after a hard rain on leaf litter. Heavy, not fresh. I clicked my headlamp off after the first quarter mile and let my eyes adjust. The trail was what I expected. Rooty sections, water bars, and stretches where the tread was armored with flat stones. The white blazes were clear. Maples and oaks were at peak. Thick carpets of red and brown leaves hiding golf ball rocks that like to roll ankles. I've hiked enough to keep my eyes down on the tread and move steady, not fast. A few minutes past sunrise, a pair of hikers came down toward me, quiet and polite. The kind of nod you exchange when it's early and cold. I kept climbing. Somewhere around 2 miles in, the trail steepened and started to switch back in earnest. The grade felt right for where I was, and I knew that ahead there was a narrow scree-chute that cuts the path like a gray scar. Before I got there, I noticed a stone placed on the inside edge of a turn. It was flat and wide, about the size of a serving tray. Trail crews use stones like that all the time to shore up the corner. So, I didn't think much of it until 20 feet later. There was another one. Smaller, set the same way, then another. There was a regular spacing to them, each resting where my inside foot would go if I cut tight. It felt more like a message than a fix, and I don't say that lightly. Around that time, the smell shifted from wet leaves to something stronger. It was like wet dog and compost, the way a shed can smell after animals bed down in it for a week. The hair on my neck prickled and I told myself a bear must have moved through before me. I said, "Hey bear," out loud, the way you're supposed to. That's when I heard footfalls uphill from me. Not a scramble or a 4-beat wrestle. These were paced and heavy to beat steps set down with weight. I stopped. The steps stopped. I said, "Hiker down here." No answer for a few seconds. Then a single low whoop rolled out of the hollow behind the switchbacks. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a coyote. It was a round chest-level sound that I felt more than heard. I don't like to leave the trail alone, but curiosity will pull you sideways if you let it. I stepped off only far enough to keep the blazes in sight. 10, maybe 15 yards. Sidestepping along the slope so I could still see the corridor of the tread looping below me. The ground was slick under the leaves, and the hill had that angle where every foot of gain feels like a controlled slide. I planted one trekking pole at an angle, pointing back toward the trail, just to keep my line honest. 10 yards in, under a low ruend, I found an oval patch in the duff about 6 feet long, flattened like something had bedded there. On the windward side, someone or something had leaned snapped branches into a low windbreak, knee-high, tight enough to knock down a draft, not tall enough to hide behind. The broken ends were clean and twisted, not chewed. Deer don't build windbreaks. Kids make forts that look like forts. This was neither. On the ground beside the oval lay a stick about as thick as my forearm. The bark had been peeled away in long strips, so smooth it looked polished, not gnawed. One end had crush marks like it had been bitten and rolled or hammered against something solid. In a dark, damp patch of soil near the base of a rock were 2 partial impressions in a line. I could make out the heel and the midfoot flattening, And then the 4-foot area where the toes should have been wasn't. Crisp, but wide and sunk alike, like the weight rolled through a flexible foot. The spacing didn't match how a person would step on a slope like that. It was set wider with a different center of gravity. I said the word Bigfoot out loud. It was half a joke to break the tension. From farther up slope, I got a single hard clack of wood on wood in reply. One strike, not a branch falling, and not the echo of my own pull. Whoever, or whatever was up there, had just hit something with a stick. I left the way I came. I put my boots in my own prints and backed out to the trail because that slope was waiting to take my ankle. When I stepped onto the tread, I saw that another hand-sized stone had been placed on the inside edge of the path, fresh, like someone had just set it there while I was upslope. The feeling that I was being managed settled in my gut and stayed there. I've dealt with bluff charges from deer and one black bear that huffed and left. This felt like rules being taught without a word. I didn't run. I kept a steady pace up the next switchback, then the next, eyes on the blazes in the corridor ahead. The footfalls resumed one level above me, always uphill and just off to the side, as if something was choosing to hold the high ground and mirror my pace. When I stopped to listen, it stopped after a beat or two. When I moved, it moved with a delay, like it didn't mind letting me know it was there as long as I kept going. I didn't see a body. What I saw were branches sway where the air was still, and spaces between trunks press and relax the way mass shifts when you step around a tree. At one turn, a smooth stone slid down the slope and rocked to a stop at my feet. It didn't tumble and scatter. It rocked once and settled like it had been set and then nudged. Just below the top, a pair of ridge runners came down toward me. The lead was a woman in a windbreaker with a folding saw strapped to her hip. The one behind her was a guy with a small radio clipped high on his shoulder. They looked me over the way people do when they've seen faces come through that look like mine. I told them I was fine, just feeling watched. I described the oval bed, the peeled stick, the partial tracks with the odd mid-foot roll, and the single wood knock. I didn't use the word Bigfoot with them. The guy nodded and said they had odd fall activity at the scree shoot the last couple of seasons. Rock placement on the inside of turns and pacing up slope. He said acorns and leaf drop draw in everything that eats. And sometimes you get behavior that's about spacing and control. He asked if I minded if they walked with me for the last bit to the top. They put me in the middle without making it feel like a big deal. The woman set a measured pace and didn't let me stop. The guy kept a few steps back and watched the slope. The radio was on scan. At one saddle before the final slab, a low whoop came up from the hollow behind us, farther away than before, but still close enough to feel in my chest. The woman reached out with her folding saw and struck a dead branch twice, sharp and clean. We listened. Nothing answered, she said. Let's keep going. No drama. No jokes. We walked onto the sandstone of McAfee Knob 10 minutes later like we were arriving at any other overlook on any other day. The top was almost empty. A couple from Roanoke sat with their backs to the valley, leaning on their packs. A trail runner took a breath and turned to go. The breeze up there had the kind of clean edge that cuts through smells. I sat and drank water. My hands shook the way they do when your body lets go of tension. The ridge runners didn't hover. They gave the horizon a sweep and watched the tree line the way you watch a road before you cross. After a minute, the guy keyed his radio and logged what happened in plain words. Unusual wildlife behavior near the screen shoot. Rock placement, pacing up slope. Single wood strike, no contact, and asked a ranger to call my cell if they wanted details. I gave my first name and number and thanked them. The woman said to pass through that stretch without stopping on the way down and to hike with someone if I had the choice until the first hard frost. She said it like it was standard advice, not superstition. I didn't linger on the ledge. The view was what everyone knows. Catawba Valley spread out below. Tinker Cliffs down ridge and it felt earned, but I wasn't interested in eating lunch there. I started down with the same steady pace and didn't stop to snack until I was well below the switchbacks. The footfalls didn't follow. The smell eased as I lost elevation. Bird noise came back in little pockets. By the time I walked into the lot, more cars had arrived and a dog was barking at nothing in particular. I sat on my tailgate and waited. Half an hour later, the ranger called. He was calm and precise. He said that rock placing and wood knocks get logged there a few times in the fall. He said the pattern suggests territorial signaling from something that prefers to control spacing without showing itself. And he left that something undefined. He didn't talk down to me or try to sell me an explanation. He told me they advise pairs through that stretch on weekdays during peak leaf color and to stay on the trail, move through steadily, and not to stop at the scree chute. He said if I had any more details to add after I'd had time to think, I could call back and leave a message. That was it. No spin, no hype. I crossed the lot and posted a brief caution on the kiosk. Unusual rock placement and pacing above switchbacks today. If solo, consider grouping up through the chute. I am not the type to start arguments on boards or write up long manifestos about what I think I experienced. I just wanted the next person walking up there alone to have a heads up without having to learn it the hard way. On the drive home, I kept catching myself clenching the wheel and relaxing it. Nothing had touched me, nothing had charged. But I had been walked through someone else's rules, and that sits in the body in a different way than a clean scare. 2 weeks later, I went back with a friend. We picked a clear day that started in the 30s and promised sun by mid-morning. We parked at the same lot and started late enough that we didn't need lights. The leaves were drier, louder underfoot. We talked at a normal volume about work, about nothing. When we got to the same stretch, we didn't stop. We didn't step off the tread. We passed the scree chute and kept climbing. There were stones on the inside edges here and there, the kind that crews set, but nothing fresh and strange. No smell wall, no pacing. We were on the knob by 10:30, split a sandwich, and stayed longer than I did the first time. It was a normal hike with a better view than most. I don't have a theory that explains every detail. I know what I saw and heard and smelled. I know how a pair of experienced volunteers treated it like a known seasonal pattern. I know a ranger called me back with measured language and told me they log in like that. People will hang a word on it. I used the word Bigfoot once out loud and the mountain answered with a stick on wood. Maybe that means nothing. Maybe it means the same thing to anyone who moves through a place that isn't theirs. Sometimes the ridge is occupied and you are being allowed through. That's enough for me. I changed my rules. Daylight only for that section in October. No solo if I can help it. Pass the chute without stopping. Leave the place as I found it and accept that not every ridge is empty just because I don't see who lives there. When the leaves turn and the slope smells like a wet kennel and compost heap, I keep moving, keep my hands calm on the poles, and treat the switchbacks like a front door. My wife and I took our 2-year-old to Ket Cove Campground in Great Smoky Mountains National Park the last weekend of September. We live close enough to make it a short drive, and I've camped around the Smokies since I was a kid. The forecast called for clear skies and nights dropping into the 40s. The campground was full. The board at the entrance station showed no vacancies, and a ranger at the kiosk reminded everyone about quiet hours starting at 10 o'clock, food storage, and no generators after 8. We weren't doing anything special, just a simple fall camp out before leaf season got crazy. We were assigned a perimeter site on Loop C behind our tent. The trees thickened and dropped into a shallow drainage that ran toward the picnic area near Anthony Creek. The campground store had the bear active signs up, which is normal for fall. I've had bears cut through camps before. They usually shuffle around the fire ring, sniff the air, and move on once they figure out you're watching. We set up the 3% tent on level ground, staked everything so wind wouldn't work it loose, and ran a small battery lantern from the ceiling loop. The toddler had her sleep sack and a stuffed bear that lived in the car when we were in the tent. Dinner was tortillas and cheese folded and browned in a small skillet with sliced apples, When smoke drifted low across the loop, I could hear families talking, a dog collar jingle, a couple in a small arrow stream to sights down clinking mugs. A group of college kids 3 sights the other direction had a Tacoma and one of those freestanding hammock racks. It felt normal. Acorns were already dropping. You'd hear one thump through leaves, bounce once, then stop. We slid our latch cooler under the picnic table, pushed tight against the leg so it wouldn't be easy to grab. Dry food went in the SUV. I backed the SUV, and so the rear hatch and the tent vestibule lined up. The plan was to keep bedtime simple for the toddler. Read a short book. Lights out early. No wandering around for quiet hours. By 10:15, generators across the campground went quiet. The interior of the loop calmed down to a few last zippers, the scrape of a camp chair. Out on the edge where we were, it went dark fast. The lantern cast a ring that didn't reach the tree line. Beyond that was just the mass of the woods and faint starlight. Around 10:40, I heard footsteps just outside the light. Not skittering, not the random patter squirrel makes when it runs branch to branch. It was step, step, pause, the way a person plants a heel and then rolls onto the ball. The steps were wide enough apart that I took a breath and told myself it was a bear taking its time. Then a sour smell drifted in, and it wasn't skunk. It was closer to a wet dog bed left in a garage with a sweat note to it that felt old. The cooler moved. There wasn't the metal scrape I expected. It slid 6 and straight out from under the bench like it had been pulled by a strong, steady hand. The latch held. Conversations around us stopped. I don't mean everybody yelled about a bear. I mean people went quiet in the way you do when you're listening hard. I reached for the lantern switch and left it on. I mouthed bear to my wife, and we both listened for the huffing sound they make. I didn't hear it. I heard the weight of something large settle through leaves. It stood just past the edge of the light and didn't come in. An acorn dropped near the fire ring and popped. Then there was the small clink of metal like a finger tapped the grate. I moved my body between the lantern and the tent, not trying to be a hero, just keeping my shape from being the first thing it saw. The steps went wide around the ring and stopped behind the SUV. After a minute or two, everything went still. We called it a night without saying anything, turned the lantern down to its low setting, and lay on our pads with the child already asleep. Sometime after 1:30, the steps came back with the same measured pace. I felt it in the ground before I heard it on the leaves. The SUV gave a short, solid thud right in the center of the rear hatch. If you've ever pushed a hatch shut with the heel of your hand when the shocks are stiff, it sounded like that, only it pushed inward. The plastic trim popped a little and settled. Our daughter stirred and rolled without fully waking. Then a slow drag ran across the aluminum lip of the camper shell insert I'd added to the cargo area. 5 distinct tracks, not a scrabble, not nails ticking. It was even and patient, like someone counting the width of the panel. My wife gripped my wrist. I kept my breathing controlled because I didn't want the child to pick up my nerves. From the tree 10 yards back came a low oomph, not a growl, not a person's cough. It was short and heavy and sat in my chest for a second. 5 or 6 seconds later, farther down toward the curve, there was a single knock. It sounded like wood striking wood, flat and on purpose, and then nothing. I whispered black bear again because I didn't want to open the door to anything worse. But the step pattern made no sense for a bear. Bears plant more of the foot at once, and there's a shuffle to it. This had heel and toe, with space between steps that suggested long legs. The mass felt wrong for a person though. You could feel it in the way the leaf litter compressed and didn't spring back right away. Our daughter sat up at that point and stared at the tent wall where the SUV was a dark block behind the fabric. She said clear and level, "The tall one." Then her eyes shifted back to me like she was double-checking my face to see if that was okay. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just said it like she was reporting what she saw. I swallowed hard. I didn't feel brave, and I didn't feel like telling a story. I said the other word in a voice I barely recognized. Very quiet, Bigfoot. I didn't say it for effect. I said it the way you say there's a person outside the door, which is to mark the risk without throwing fuel on it. We didn't run around or try to scare anything off. We kept our movements steady. I clicked the lantern off to kill the halo. I unzipped the vestibule, just enough to reach the hatch latch and eased it up. The air had that sour smell again, stronger for 10 seconds, and then moving off like it drifted sideways instead of back. I lifted our daughter under the arms and slid her into her car seat, buckled one strap so she wouldn't topple and held the other strap ready. My wife followed with a small bag of diapers and a water bottle. We moved slowly because sudden movement can read like a provocation. I shut the hatch and clicked it without slamming. Then we sat in the front seats and waited, the key in my hand, but not turned. For 20 minutes after that, we didn't hear anything but acorns bouncing and the small sounds of a campground settling, someone's sleep pad squeaking, a stove lid ticking as it cooled. Now and then, a twig compressed near the drainage and eased back up. At one point, a stone tapped the fire ring and rolled to the metal edge, the way it does when a foot nudges it and lets it return to where it was. I kept marking distances in my head: gravel at the road edge, leaves at the tree line, the space between the table and the SUV, the steps, when they came, paced at around 40. I measured that by the time between the press and where the next press landed relative to a landmark. I know that sounds like splitting hairs, but when you're trying to understand a thing that isn't making a lot of noise, distance is what you have. Around 4:30, I heard the Airstream door creak, just enough for a headlamp halo to show on the shade. It disappeared right away. They were awake and running the same numbers we were. It wasn't just us spooking ourselves. We waited for pre-dawn gray. At 6:10, birds started up. A truck down on Laurel Creek Road downshifted. That was enough for me. I turned the key, rolled us forward, at walking speed so we wouldn't light up every site, and steered to the entrance station lot. I parked under the security light and sat there 5 minutes until my hands stopped shaking. My wife rubbed our daughter's back and got her fully buckled. A ranger on early duty came out when she saw us. She listened without rushing me. She didn't smirk. She asked, "Palm or fist on the hatch?" I said palm heel by the feel and the sound drag across the metal nails or pads. I said it felt like 5 pads pulling oil on aluminum, not raking. Any claw points in prints? I said I hadn't seen prints, only felt steps and heard leaves compress, but I'd show her where it paced. How high is your rear glass? I said the center of the window, a little over 5.5 feet. Wasn't a clean boot or a paw. It showed pressure through the middle of the foot more than the toe. There were no claw tips. The spacing was long enough that she paused and measured with her forearm, then nodded. At the rear window, there was a hand-sized smear arcing across the dusty glass at about 6.5 feet from the ground. Not a defined print, just oils and a light track where dust had been moved. She took photos with a park tablet, logged our site number, and wrote our names down. She kept her voice level the whole time. Then she offered to move us to an inside loop. She said that in fall, when acorns are heavy, they sometimes get reports along the perimeter of tall figures moving through at night. She didn't push a story. She didn't offer an explanation. She just said they noted. And when families with small kids are on the edge, they'll relocate them if they ask. We said yes right away. She found us a spot on Loop B across from a family with 2 older kids and a yellow lab. She asked us to lock all food in the vehicle for the rest of the trip, cooler included, which we did. In daylight, I walked back to the old site to make sure we hadn't left anything. The grass behind the picnic table was pressed down like something had crouched there. There was a little cluster of freshly split acorn caps on the ground in a way that looked like something had shelled them while sitting. There were no perfect prints, there were no tufts of hair. I didn't try to make anything more than it was. I noted what was there and went back to my family. The day settled into normal park life. We drove the Cad's Cove Scenic Loop, let our daughter toddle around the John Oliver cabin, and watched deer feeding near Sparks Lane while bicyclists coasted past. We waved at people and talked about breakfast at the picnic area the next morning. The weather was crisp and clear. Being around other campers changed the way the night felt before it even started. We ate early, cleaned up, and put the cooler in the SUV with everything else. After quiet hours, the inside loop went to the usual soft sounds: pages turning in a tent, someone zipping a bag, a kid calling for a bathroom run, and getting shushed. We slept at one point, far off on the rich mountainside. I thought I heard a single knock, or it could have been a log shifting in somebody's fire ring. Either way, nothing came near our site, and no one's hatch thumped. On Sunday, we broke camp after breakfast, thanked the campground host for the site move, and stopped by the entrance station to let the same ranger know our new site number, and that the rest of the trip had been uneventful. I told her I planned to write the experience up for a Smoke Yoki's forum. She asked me to keep it factual, name the loop and the conditions, and repeat the food storage rules. That was it. She didn't tell me what to call it. She didn't tell me not to. She was respectful, and I appreciated that. On the drive home, we made a new rule for ourselves. No perimeter sites in October, and every scrap of food in the vehicle at all times. I can live with that. It's low effort and it keeps things simple. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm not tossing bait into an argument. I'm putting down what happened to my family at Cad's Cove late September. With the campground pool and the night running in the 40s, a cooler slid 6 in one pull. A palm heel thud landed in the middle of my rear hatch. 5 fingertips dragged across aluminum with enough patience to leave parallel tracks. A low umph sounded from the trees and a single knock answered down the loop. My child looked at a blank tent wall and called it the tall one. In the morning, a ranger found a track line without claw points and a hand smear at about 6.5 feet. She moved us to an inside loop and we finished our weekend like any other family. Tired and grateful. Back at home, the tent smell of wood smoke followed us in when I unrolled the pads to air them out. I set the cooler in the garage and it still had dust stuck to the rubber feet from where it slid. I don't have a better word for what circled our site than Bigfoot, said plainly. Not to start a fight, but because the basics line up. Heel-to-toe steps with long stride, no claws, a hand high on the glass, weight you feel more than you see, and behavior that tests the edge of the light without crossing it. I'm thankful nothing worse happened. I'm thankful a ranger took it seriously. The next time we camp with our daughter in the Smokies during Acorn Drop, we'll choose the inside of the loop close enough to hear other families breathe. It won't erase what I heard that night, and I don't need it to. I just want us to sleep, wake up to cold air and coffee, and leave with the kind of story you can tell in a steady voice, which is what I've tried to do here. I'm not from the coast, but I fly out to Washington twice a year to fish with my friend Mark. He lives in Aberdeen and works long shifts at the hospital. I plan my trips around the Falkoo Run. We book a day with a guide named Eli who grew up in Forks and knows the Hoh River like it's his commute. We don't go out to pick fights with anything. We go to swing flies at first light and try to do it right. Clean knots, barbless hooks, keep an eye on water levels, and don't crowd anyone's water. The morning this happened was early October. The fog sat low on the river, and the temperature felt like low 40s. Our plan was simple. Hike into a long gravel bar Eli called Long Table. Fish the soft edge at daybreak from moving coho and be back at the truck before lunch. We turned off Highway 101, bumped along Upper Hoh Road in the dark, and parked at a pullout near an alder corridor. The trail in was damp and quiet. I could smell leaf rot and wet earth. I don't get romantic about it because there's nothing romantic about cold fingers and numb cheeks. But I do like how the place insists you pay attention. We reached the tail of the bar as a faint gray came up. The river had that walking speed look you want for a swing. Not pushy, not dead. Eli set us up without chatter. You take the inside seam, he told me, pointing his chin. Mark, start 10 yards down. I'll hang back here and watch for rollers. We rigged 2-handed rods with pink and charcoal flies. First casts were short on purpose just to wake up the shoulders. Mend once. Let it hang. 2 steps down. Repeat. Breath fogged. The running line stung my fingertips. Somewhere out in the heavy water, a fish rolled and showed chrome. That was the only nice thing about the morning. The first rock came in on a clean arc. It didn't tumble or skip. It traveled a curved line from the alder bank and put a smooth plop in the slow water about 10 yards off my left shoulder. I stopped mid-swing. Mark laughed before he looked. "Teenagers," he said, like it was a relief to have something normal to pin it on. He called out, "Hey, we're fishing here." And then, "Good morning," because we aren't the type to start a fight over a bar. Nothing came back. No brush noise. No footstep. No throat clear. Eli didn't say anything either. He had turned his whole body to the trees, though, not just his head, and that told me what I needed to know. He has that habit when he wants full attention on a single direction. I started a new cast like nothing had happened because that's what he wanted. The smell changed next. It wasn't fish. It wasn't bear cat. It came in like wet fur and decaying leaves, but heavier, like the inside of a damp rug that never dries. It settled on us more than it blew through. I tasted it when I swallowed. Eli let me finish that pass. Then he stepped up beside me and said, "Just for us, we're not alone." His voice wasn't dramatic. He wasn't trying to scare us. He was telling us how to act. Stay together. No fast moves. If we reposition, we do it in a straight line. Mark had edged higher on the bar for a new angle and then froze. His tone was steady, but tight when he said, "You need to look at this." In the damp sand above the water line was a print that didn't fit anything I've seen on a river. It was broad and flat with a clear heel. The toes were spilled. There were no claw marks. A second print sat in front of it at a normal walking offset. This wasn't a messy slide. It was a step and it had set deep enough to hold a thin skin of seepiter. I put my boot next to it and my boot looked small. Eli crouched and touched the toe line with a knuckle like he was checking scale. He didn't guess inches or shoe size. He just looked at it for a long second and stood up. The second rock came while we were looking down. Same smooth arc from the alder side. It landed closer between Mark and me. Not hard enough to splash our legs. Just right where we would register it. I didn't tell myself a story about it. There are only a few ways to get a rock moving like that. A long mechanical throw, gravity from a slope or a branch or a hand. There is no slope there. The bank is flat under the alders. I didn't hear a branch shake. Eli said, "We're going to walk back to the bank in a straight line. Rod tips up so you don't stab the line. Mark on the inside. Breathe and place your feet." We had gone 5 steps when the sound came from upriver. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a bark. It had a rounded shape to it, like someone shaping their mouth into a tube. Except the pitch didn't match a person. A few seconds later, something downriver answered. Not the same voice, not the same timing. No repeating, just call and answer. The hair didn't stand up on my neck. It didn't need to. The facts were already enough. I kept my head on the waterline and watched the bubbles. I didn't want to fall and make drama out of it. The odor got thicker, like we had walked into the mainstream of it. Mark's lips looked pale. Eli kept talking quietly. "If it was a bear, we'd have a push or a brush crack by now," he said. Not as an argument, just to set our pace. If it was people, they'd talk back or step out. We give space, that's the rule, he said. We like the decision was already made. 2 more stones landed behind us, space-like markers. They didn't hit us, they didn't block our path. They just drew a line we had already chosen to cross. The river bit at my wader seams where the current pinched at my knees. I kept my rod tip high and thought only about where my boot was going. When we reached the inside shallows, the odor thinned with the moving air. I turned my head once and saw a shape in the alders. It was tall and dark. It stood still beside a trunk in a way that made the trunk look small. I didn't see eyes. I didn't see a face. I saw mass where a person wouldn't fit. When I looked again, the shape was gone. The brush didn't shake. There was no crash or stomp. Maybe it stepped back. Maybe it had been standing there the whole time and I only noticed now. I'm not going to add color to it. That's what I saw. We came out near a side channel where a Kino fisherman had a drift boat pulled up. He looked at us like he already knew the answer to the question he was going to ask. He didn't make a show of it. He lifted his chin at the gravel bar and then at us. Eli gave him a little nod back, and that was enough for the man to speak. Fall mornings belong to whatever claimed that bar before any of us did, he said. His tone was low and steady, same as you'd use to tell a stranger the quickest way to town. There's a bend to miles down, stays quiet. You'll still find fish. He wasn't selling a myth. He was giving us a route around a known problem. I was grateful for it. Back at the trucks, Eli took out a mud-spattered notebook he keeps for guide logs. He writes in it after the day is over. Water level, flows, wind, fly notes, but he wrote this one on the spot. He put the date, the rough bar nickname, the time. He wrote, rocks placed from Alder Bank, odor present. Vocal call up river answered down river, adult by pedal tracks. He underlined, do not use in October, and put that note next to the bar name in his itinerary. He didn't write Bigfoot. He didn't have to. Mark and I said the word in the truck because it's the only word people have for this. I'm not arguing taxonomy. I'm telling you how we handled it and what we saw. We took the man's advice and drove down to the S-bend. The fog thinned by then. The river there is wide, with a clean tail out and a seam that holds fish when the flow is right. I took the inside soft water and Mark started high. Eli pointed at an eddy line, said nothing else, and let us get back to being fishermen. On my third pass, I felt the deep thump that isn't a snag and isn't a small fish. The line came tight and the rod bowed. The coup ran down and then back at me. I cleared the line and kept pressure. The fish was bright with a touch of sea lice still on the belly. We got it to the net and popped the barbless hook free. Mark landed one 20 minutes later, then another late in the afternoon. None of those fish erased what we'd left upstream. They just gave the day a shape that didn't end in panic. We ate chowder that night in Forks. The diner had a heater going and our waiters hung off the backs of the chairs to dry. Eli talked about the day like a mechanic talks about a worn bearing. Not personal, just something to work around. The park is layered with old habits, he said. Some bars in fall get touchy. They don't all, but some do. We fish where it's offered, and we leave where it isn't. Mark nodded. I nodded. It wasn't a truce because there wasn't a fight. It was a choice to stay out of a place that had told us to get out. A year later, we went back in late November. Leaves were down. The run was mostly over. We stopped at the same pool out off Upper Hoe Road and looked from the road at Long Table. Nobody was on it. No rocks came in, no calls. The water slid past. We didn't walk in. We drove onto the spend and fished there for a couple hours, more for the sound of the swing than for the chance at a fish. We landed nothing and didn't mind. It felt right to keep that bar out of our first light routine in October. Eli had kept his note. He wasn't putting clients on that spot in that month anymore. He had other bars and they were good enough. I know what people ask after a story like this. Why didn't you go back with more people, or with a camera, or with a tape measure, or with plaster? My answer is that we weren't there to win anything. We were on public water that has other rules built into it. Old rules that I don't need to name to respect. We saw a set of signs, placed rocks, a smell that didn't belong to any animal I've worked around, a print with split toes and a clean heel, a call and an answer from to directions. And we acted like adults and removed ourselves. We said the word Bigfoot in the truck because that's what you say when you do and have a better word and the package of details fits. Eli never said it. He didn't correct us either. He just logged it and rerouted his plan. That's enough for me. When I think back on it, I don't get scared. I get careful. I picture Mark's face when he found the print and how he kept his voice level. I picture Eli's body turned to the alders, his gloves off so he could feel the line and the ground at the same time. I picture the Kino man, steady as a leveled boat, pointing us to quiet water without making a sermon out of it. The Ho gave us 3 bright fish that afternoon and a boundary I will carry forward without complaint. There is no curse on that bar and no debt to pay. There is only the memory of a morning when we were told clearly and without injury that a place already had an owner for those hours. We heard it and we stepped aside. I don't need anything more than that. I'm not trying to make anyone believe me. I'm writing this because I spent a week telling myself I overreacted, then went back with a ranger and saw the same things in clean daylight. I live in Portland. I hike most weekends from late spring through fall. Nothing heroic. Forest roads, mellow trails, things you can do after breakfast and be home before dark. My friend Evan is taller and stronger than me and has a higher risk tolerance. I'm the one who reads the kiosk, checks the weather, and prints the closure notices. We have a routine, paper map in a gallon bag, headlamps even for day hikes, a little first aid kit, bear spray, extra socks. We're not experts. We don't chase anything. This was supposed to be a color hike before the rain arrived for the winter. Late October, we went for a loop on a decommissioned spur in the Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness near Mount Hood. The idea was simple. Walk a closed fire road above Salmon River Road, see the last of the vine maple red in the shady gullies. Cut across an obvious connector the locals use and drop back down on the lower road. A volunteer at a different trail had told us the weekend before that those old spurs can be like sidewalks for a couple miles and are good for color when the creek bottoms hold cold air. I checked the Zigzag Ranger District page. It wasn't a general rifle day. We wore bright knit caps anyway. We drove out of town under high clouds, parked in a legal turnoff, and took a short mossy connector up to the spur. You can tell a road that's been closed to vehicles for a long time. Water bars cut diagonally across the crown. All air sprouts in the center like a planting strip. The surface is firm and quiet under boots. The air was cool and still. No chainsaw noise. No hammering. We walked maybe a mile when we hit a wall across the road. I don't mean windfall. I mean a shoulder-high barricade made on purpose. Long logs laid crosswise, ends jammed into dirt BMS-like posts, shorter sections stacked to the gaps. Bark was scuffed where something had gripped and lifted. I stood there longer than Evan did. The first thought was that the Forest Service or volunteers set it to keep side-by-sides from sneaking in, but I've seen agency barricades. They usually have reflective ribbon or a sign or cut marks that look consistent. This looked like someone had built it with hands and leverage and time. We stepped over it. That was a choice I regret. It felt like nothing in the moment, just one more barrier you pass so you can get to the quiet stretch. But I knew I was breaking my own rule. If something says closed, even when it's not written down, respect it. Past the wall, the tread had no boot prints except ours. There were deer slots, a few coyote tracks, and soft spots. 100 yards up, we saw the first thing that didn't fit anything I know. An uprooted sapling had been jammed upside down into the mud beside the road. The root wad sat on top, clean and round like a bundled brush. The trunk was driven straight down. The wood wasn't rotten. It would take strength to push it in that far without snapping it. I pushed the trunk a little and felt how solid it was. Around the next wide bend, there was a bed on the inside of the curve. Not a campsite, not a place where someone laid gear. The bracken and ferns were pressed into an oval about the size of a small two-person tent. All the stems had been flattened the same direction. The center was lower, the edges crisped a little by light frost. No hair, no obvious scat, no boot prints on it. If I'm honest, it made my stomach feel hollow. It was too neat and it sat in a spot where the wind would have swirled the fronds into that shape. We talked about turning back right there. Evan said we'd go to the next bend for a view. I said, okay. I wanted to be the reasonable one and not the anxious one. We agreed if anything else felt off, we'd back out. We kept our voices at a normal volume because several kiosks around Mount Hood have little S-blurbs that basically say, if something strange happens, don't run. Don't whisper, keep things calm, and leave the way you came. We weren't thinking folklore. We were thinking about stumbling onto someone's private project or a pile someone planned to return to. The sound came from upslope. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't an elk bugle or a branch crack. It was a single deep exhale that rolled through the trees and down at us like a big set of lungs, clearing in one controlled push. It had the chest behind it that a human can't fake at distance. I felt it in my sternum the way you feel the first thump of a live drum in a small room. We stopped. 10 seconds later, there were 2 knocks, wood on wood, evenly spaced, not an accident of wind or a little stick tapping. A hollow, blunt contact like a bat against a trunk, carried down by still air. We didn't yell. We didn't pretend we hadn't heard. We said, "We going to head out the way you talk to a person you do ain't want to startle." We turned in place and started back toward the log wall at a regular walking pace. I kept my eyes on the road and the banks to either side. Evan watched upslope. We were 20 steps into the retreat when a shape crossed the road in front of us, about 50 yards away at the shallow spin before the long straight. It moved left to right. It took 3 long steps across a track as wide as a single lane street. The head and shoulders didn't bow. The gait was smooth and level. The torso looked thick through the middle like someone who lifts for a living, but does and trained to look cut. The arms swung low and far. It never turned its head at us. It was taller than anyone I know and not fat, just big. It cleared the road and vanished into salal and young hemlock on the downhill side. Evan said Bigfoot under his breath and immediately looked at me like he wished he hadn't used the word. I didn't laugh. I couldn't think of any other single word that fit that set of facts. 10 seconds later, a second figure crossed the same line. It was shorter by a foot, maybe more, but built similarly. Same level glide, same long steps, same lack of glance. It also cleared the road and dropped into the brush without a branch thrash or a crash you would expect from a bear. We both stood there and counted to 3, then kept walking at the same steady pace. No charge, no scream, no thrown stones. We talked about dinner. That sounds stupid in writing, like we were pretending it hadn't happened, but that's what the advice said at the kiosks, and it gave my brain something to do besides spiral. When we reached the log wall, we had to climb back over it. I felt eyes on my back, but I can't tell you that was real. What I can say is there were no fresh boot prints coming toward us on our side either. No one had walked in behind us since we started. At the first water bar below the wall, we met a volunteer patroller. Older guy, green jacket, radio on the strap, pickup parked down at the turnoff. He asked if we were doing okay in that careful way that invited a real answer. We gave him the facts in order. The wall, the upside-down saplings, the bed, the exhale, the 2 knocks, the 2 crossings. I kept it dry and linear. He didn't smile. He didn't roll his eyes. He said he hears about paired crossings on that spur and to neighboring ones after the maples go red and before the heavy November weather. Bow hunters avoid the spurs even when they're allowed to be in there, not because of rules, but because something owns that ridge when it wants it quiet. He walked us back to the truck with us in front and him watching the slope. He told us not to run and not to lock our eyes on the timber for too long. At the junction, he wrote a short note on a pad for the Zigzag Ranger District. Log wall, inverted saplings, crushed bed, 2 figures crossing, no aggression, visitors exited without incident. He said he'd pass it along and that if we wanted to talk to a ranger about it later, we could. He didn't tell us we were crazy. He didn't tell us we were right. He said, "Respect the barricades." We drove home in silence for the first 20 minutes, then started making practical lists. Dinner, laundry, Monday tasks, like we were pressing our minds back into a slot they fit. I replayed it all week. I tried to file it under weird, but harmless, and I tried to not assign any labels. By Thursday, I emailed the Zigzag station and asked if someone would be willing to walk in with us to document the site. I wrote that we weren't looking for anything, just verification of the wall and the saplings in the bed. A ranger called me back. She was professional but friendly. She said she would be in the area Sunday morning and could meet us at the station if we wanted to show her. We met her at 8. She went through our gear like a quick safety check, then had us drive her to the turnout. We walked the same connector up to the spur. In daylight with 3 people in a steady pace, the road looked even more like a green tunnel. We reached the wall. It was still there. She ran a hand along the top log and pointed out where a lever would have been set to lift and swing it. She noted the lack of cut marks and the way the ends were keyed into the BMS. She didn't say who built it. She didn't speculate. She said it was too tidy for random blowdown. We stepped over. The first upside-down sapling was still planted in the mud, rooted end up like a stiff brush. She gripped the trunk with both hands and tried to wiggle it. It moved maybe an inch. The wood was sound, she said in a neutral voice. That took force. Farther up, the bed was still there. The edges had a little rime from the cold nights, but the oval was intact. She crouched and used a pencil to show the direction the stems lay. She took a couple photos. Not for us, for her file. We didn't find tracks you could cast. Deer had churned the soft spots since our first pass. The ranger explained that decommissioned roads become travel corridors. Animals and people use them for the same reason. The grade is easy and the line is clear. She said when those corridors are quiet most of the year and then suddenly get traffic during a seasonal draw, like fall color, things that live there push back. I asked her what she thought had crossed the road. She didn't bite, she said. You already know what you saw. My job is to record the conditions you reported. It wasn't dismissive, it was a boundary. Back at the wall, she took a few more notes. She said she wasn't going to put a shiny new sign on it because that invites the wrong kind of attention. But she would formalize the note from the volunteer and mark that spur as something not to recommend when people ask for easy color walks at the station. Then she said the same sentence the patroller did. Respect the barricades. We thanked her. She wished us a safe season. That was it. I am going to say the taboo word once, so do and get deem is asking why I danced around it. Bigfoot. That's what the taller one looked like. That's what the smaller one looked like. I've seen bears in Oregon. I've watched them move. Their shoulders don't sit like that. Their gait doesn't hold level like that. They move in a different way across open ground. And they don't take a track that wide in 3 strides. If you decide I misread everything, that's fine. I'm not here to convert anyone. I am writing this for the handful of people who hike out there in October and think log walls are just a hassle between them and a pretty bend in the road. We changed our habits after that. We walked the Salmon River trails and out and back. We did the lower part of Boulder Ridge where it's signed and open. We took a piece of the Bonanza Trail. We stopped stepping over stacked logs. This is my practical advice. If you find yourself in the same spot we did, if you come to a wall across a closed road that isn't random blowdown, if it is stacked and keyed and tight, and the ground beyond has odd sign like upside down saplings planted in mud and a clean oval bed pressed into bracken, turn around. Keep your voice normal. Keep your pace steady. Don't run. Don't try to prove anything. The loop you imagined in your head ain't worth testing. Whoever built that wall. I can't give you a neat science lecture to wrap this up. I can only tell you what I saw and what a ranger confirmed as present a week later. The road felt wrong for us that day. Someone or something made it clear in ways I could measure with my eyes and my hands. It was enough. We left without incident and we didn't go back. I sleep better with that line drawn. Respect the barricades. Don't step over log walls you didn't build. I grew up a couple hours south of the Allegheny, and every fall I meet up with 2 old friends for one last camp out before the snow makes the back roads a problem. It's simple. One night in the woods, then breakfast in Cane before we head home. We don't do big campgrounds anymore. We look for legal dispersed spots along Kinzua Creek Road, somewhere between the turn toward the old Kinua Bridge and Route 321. We keep it basic. To small tents, a steel fire pan, a cooler strapped in the truck bed, folding chairs, and enough wood to get through the evening. This story is about the night I stopped treating that forest like a backdrop and started treating it like a place with rules I didn't fully understand. We didn't go out there looking for trouble. We went for one quiet night. We got something else. We reached the pull-off in late afternoon, first weekend of November. The temperature sat in the low 40s and the air had that cold, wet edge that hangs over a creek after rain. Most of the leaves were down and the woods looked open. Oaken Beach stood bare across the slope. A thin line of spruce followed the water's edge. The creek bent past our sight with a gravel bar across from us. Round stones stacked and locked the way water leaves them. We leveled the truck by rolling the front wheels onto a flat rock, set the tents parallel to the water, and built a knee-high fire in the pan. Food went into the hard-sided cooler, and I cinched the strap through the bed cleat. We joked about raccoons and bears, ran through the same old arguments about how to hang a food bag. We didn't. It was a car camp, and sat down with the first hot drinks of the evening. It got dark fast, the way it does after time changes. The first sound was to knocks from across the creek. They were solid, evenly spaced with just enough separation to mark them as separate hits. They weren't sharp like a woodpecker or messy like a branch dropping. We all heard them. We looked at each other with the same expression, that half grin you wear when you want to keep it light. Mark grabbed her wrist thick sticks and clacked them together twice. I didn't tell him not to. It felt harmless, like waving back at a stranger. We tossed the sticks back in the pile and sat down. The reply came from behind our tents. It was a single knock, deeper than ours, closer than I was ready for, and it carried through the chair legs into the gravel. We all stood up without saying anything. The fire, which had felt normal a minute earlier, now looked too small. We did a quick lamp check, scanning the thin understory in the slope behind us. All we saw were trunks and leaf litter. No eye shine, no movement. We told each other it was a log rolling downhill. I knew it wasn't. I didn't push the point. After that, the creek noise took over again, and we drifted back to the chairs. We kept our lamps around our necks instead of setting them down. The fire cracked, and the tiny sparks went straight up. The air smelled like wet leaves and cold smoke. We cooked early and kept the wrappers in a bag in the cab. We weren't careless, we just weren't expecting anything big. The next sign came off the water. Stones rolled in a slow line upstream to downstream like something heavy was feeling its way along each step. It didn't sound like a deer. Deer move light and quick, and they splash without thinking about each footfall. This was different. Heel first, careful, measured. The sound slowed as it reached the bend across from us, then stopped. The creek surface didn't change. The alder and cedar along the far bank didn't move. If you had walked up at that moment, you'd have called it a quiet night. A voice followed. It came from near the truck where the tents through a dark lane between the firelight and the cab. It said Jesse's name, but not right. One syllable slipped. It hit the shape of his name like someone who had heard it once from a distance and tried to copy the sound. Jessa. It wasn't an echo. There were no cliffs. The ground was soft. It wasn't one of us playing a joke. We were all inside of each other, and no one was in the mood to be clever. Jesse stared at me and shook his head once. Mark said, "No one answered." We didn't. The cooler latch clicked metal on metal. I knew that sound. The short snap I'd listened for all summer when I checked it after raccoons. The lid lifted an inch and then slammed hard enough to rock the truck. Water splashed off a shallow rock downstream where the vibration carried. We all stood again. I had my lamp in my hand, but kept it pointed down because I didn't want a tunnel of light and a black wall outside it. Gravel crunched near the driver's side door. There was a slow exhale right then, close. Not wind, not a wheeze or cough. Just a long breath that raised the hair along my arms. The next sound was the soft drag of skin on glass. I lit the side window with the edge of my beam. A handprint was smeared high across it. The placement stopped all of us. None of us could reach that spot without stepping on the tire or jumping. The fingers were long and spaced wider than any of ours by a full inch. I measured later, but I knew it on sight. The palm was narrow, and the heel of the hand made a clean arc through the dust on the glass. No claw marks, no pads, not a bear. Mark said the word Bigfoot, the way you say a diagnosis you don't want. Low, like if he didn't say it too loud. Maybe it would stay just a word. No one laughed. No one argued for another animal. We all just stood and collected detail because that's what your brain does when it tries not to panic. We doused the fire 2 coals to save our night vision. We sat in the cab with the doors open, feet on the running boards, ready to shut ourselves in. The creek kept up its steady noise. Every other sound stood out against it. Stones moved again along the far bank, the same careful pace. I panned my light slowly across the cedars and alder. I didn't catch eyeshine. I didn't catch a shape. What I did see right at the edge of the beam were saplings that bowed and released in a pattern that matched a slow stride. I didn't think wind. Wind hits everything at once. This came in sequence. I won't try to dress it up. It was a big thing moving with control. We started the truck and turned the headlights on the tree line and the gravel bar. The white light flattened everything, took away depth, and gave us a wide frame to watch. Jesse gripped the wheel and said, 10 minutes. If it doesn't come in, we go. I agreed. Mark agreed. I know what it sounds like to leave your own camp, but I don't run a scoreboard for courage. We were out there to relax, and nothing about the last hour fit that plan. The moment the engine idled and the high beams fixed on the trees, the movement stopped. We didn't see a retreat. We didn't see a charge. We saw nothing at all. For a while, I thought we had imagined everything. That lasted until the tailgate thumped once. Low, like something heavy touching it in passing. The cab rocked a fraction of an inch side to side. Jesse didn't look away from the tree line. Mark didn't speak. I kept my hand on the door handle because I needed a task, even a useless one. We waited the full 10 minutes. I counted them on my watch because I needed a number. They were long and clean. No more knocks, no more voice, no more stone shifting. At the end of the 10, we shut the doors together and started backing out. We didn't gun it. We didn't fishtail. We eased onto Quaw Creek Road and drove steady toward Kane. The truck felt like a safe room with wheels. No one turned to look until we hit the first sign for town. We took a cheap room on Friley Street. I thought I'd go for a drink, but the idea of sitting in a bar and trying to package the night into a story made my stomach turn. We didn't turn on the TV. We laid our gear out to dry and stared at the ceiling. Sleep came in short pieces between the heater cycling on and off. At first light, we drove back with Dan, a local outfitter Jesse knew from buying trout gear. Don's shop is on Chestnut Street. He's one of those men who doesn't feel silence if he doesn't have to. He listened to the broad outline and didn't act entertained. He stood by the truck and looked at the smeared print. He didn't put his hand over it like a movie. He took out a tape, measured the distance across the fingers, and called out the number. Each finger was about an inch wider than ours. He looked at the placement and said it would take a tall person stretched to hit it like that. He checked the cooler latch and nodded once like he had seen it pop like that before. We crossed the road to the gravel bar where we had heard the footfalls. The prints weren't clean, but there was a line of deeper depressions at intervals that matched long strides, long enough that we had to open our hips to match them. Each impression was heavier at the back, as if whatever made them set the heel first and rolled forward. The path moved from the bar toward a cedar thicket a little downriver into shade where frost still held on the soil. Dan pointed out a few more signs. Broken alder tips at a height above my line of sight. A crushed patch of leaves off the bar where something had paused. I asked him what he thought. He didn't give me a word for it. He gave rules. First, don't answer knocks. He said it with no drama, like he was telling me not to feed a dog from the table. Second, make normal camp noise. Talk, tap tent stakes, rattle pots, anything that marks you as human and not hiding. Third, in fall when the acorns are thick, camp closer to maintain sights. He said everything big is feeding then and the edges get crowded. Fourth, lock food down and use a buried canister, even if you're camping out of a truck. Fifth, if you hear your name from the dark or anything close to your name, leave. He didn't tell us to study it or test it or wait for daylight. He said leave. We packed our gear and checked the truck for real damage. There wasn't any beyond a couple shallow scuffs on the tailgate where the paint had taken a hit from something smooth. We took one last look at the print and then washed it off. I won't pretend I wanted to keep it. I didn't. I didn't need a trophy to remember how it felt to see it there. On the drive back through Kane, I watched the town go by. School sign, gas station, a couple of shops that opened late on Sundays, and felt a gap between the normal morning and what we'd done the night before. It wasn't fear, it was adjustment. The woods had rules we didn't know. We stepped on one by answering back. That was on us. A year later, we kept the tradition, but we changed the plan. Same weekend, different site. We chose a small pad closer to Kenua Bridge State Park with an easy reach of the road noise you get when a car passes the main lot. We brought a proper bare canister and used it. Even though our food could have stayed in the truck, we cooked early, cleaned early, and kept the fire small. We talked in normal voices and didn't play camp games with the dark. When the night settled in, we listened to owls and the straight run of the creek over stones. We didn't hear knocks. We didn't hear names. We slept. There isn't a punchline to this. No chase, no fight, no proof I can frame. There is a print on a window I could only wash off and a set of sounds I can still put in order without changing anything. There's also a boundary I didn't see until it was pressed right up against us, and then I saw it clearly. We had treated that place like a stage for our weekend. It isn't a stage. It's a place where large, quiet things move the way they want to move. I don't have a new belief system. I have a short list of rules and a very simple choice I make now. Respect first, curiosity second. I still go back to that creek, and I still love the late fall there, the bare trunks, the cold air off the water, the quiet. I don't answer knocks. I keep my food locked. I pick sites that give me an exit, and I come home with what I came for. One cold night with old friends, breakfast in town, and the reminder that the woods don't owe me an explanation. I'm fine with that. I sleep better now that I know where the line is.